introduce themselves and all of that. I'm going to share this screen. Is that clear? Does that look nice and clear for you?
It's just coming up. Yes.
Great. All right. All right. So let me pull YouTube back over here. And we can start inviting them to introduce themselves. The feed is live. So excited. Okay, I'm going to start recording. And I'm going to open the doors right now. Hello, everybody. Come on in. Welcome. Hello, Alexis. How are you? Welcome. All right. Let's see. Come on in. As you're coming in, go ahead and feel free to there we go. Yes. Tell us where you're from. Where are you joining us from today? All right. Absolutely, Alexis. We are super excited to start the conversation.
Ooh, I love Placerville. Someone was from Placerville.
Yeah. Cool, Montebello, Riverside. Hello from San Diego. Kirsten Hickman says, yes, Tara, you know me. Hello.
Oh, I know. Hi, Kristen. Oh, how neat. That's neat. It's going so fast, I couldn't cut. I'm glad. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah. Hi, Nancy.
Oceanside. I bet it's cooler there. It's like 103 here today.
Yeah, good tip. So make sure, Alexa says, make sure that you're sending your comments to all panelists and attendees. Right, so otherwise you're just sending it to us.
I've made that mistake, so
yeah.
Happen.
Hello from Ventura. Welcome, Patty. 115 in El Centro right now.
Wow. That's unbearably hot.
Yes, yes.
She says yes.
All right, got a couple more minutes. We're going to go ahead and get started.
San Diego, they have a great homeless program there.
Oh. Awesome. 90 degrees, even in San Diego.
Wow, yeah. And gonna be hotter the next few days is the forecast.
Yes, so the question will any of these sessions be recorded to show if there's anyone to attend? Absolutely, the whole series has been recorded. This session is no exception. We will record it, we will share the resources, the slides. I will drop a link in once I kind of get the introduction underway. For those of you that kind of have been on for the last few days, I'll start to pop links in as they come up. One link I will send you to is our distance learning microsite, which houses all of the resources you could want. And if you are a CTA member and wanting to submit, and wanting to get credit for a certificate of completion for the number of sessions attended, you are more than welcome to watch past videos and then submit one reflection per video. And we will tally that all up, put it on a certificate, send it out to you the first week of September. Okay, it is now 3:30. We're going to go ahead and get started. So welcome, hello, and thank you for taking the time on this last day of the Distance Learning Support Series. I am so excited to have Tara Turrentine here, coordinator with education for homeless children and youth program at the Sacramento County Office of Education. And just a quick sort of piece. Tara, when I was in San Juan Unified School District, I had done some work listening and learning from sort of homeless students and families. And, you know, in my first round of listening and learning, what I heard just completely changed me forever. I had no idea the massive amount of complexity and uncertainty that our homeless and unstably housed students are forced to navigate each and every day. And so I was exasperated, and I literally went on to the Sacramento County Office of Education website. I found Tara's name and I called her. And what ensued after that was hands down the best education I've received as an educator. My mind was open / blown. And it's the kind of thing that you can't unsee and you can't uncare about. And so I'm just so excited to be able to share, to be able to bring her to the distance learning to speak with you all today. And then please do, you know, when the videos are shared, please do send this information far and wide. Okay. So this is the last day of the Distance Learning Support Series, August launch. We will be continuing throughout the fall, and we will be continuing the series throughout the fall. And we have sort of cycled through some of these. We've created some trailheads around the different focus areas. We talked in the first week a lot about getting yourselves organized for distance learning. We talked about building culture and engagement through a distance learning, in a distance learning context. We talked about virtual pedagogy, distance pedagogy, and also tiered engagement, social emotional learning. We talked about anti-racism and culturally relevant pedagogy in a distance context. We talked about tools for collaboration. And today we are talking, we have concurrent sessions, one on special education, and here this session on homeless and unstably housed youth. And then, so the next piece that we're going to go to in September, and we're putting the schedule together very quickly based on the data and the input that you've given us. We will be focusing on culture engagement and social emotional learning. We'll be looking at trauma-informed practices, social emotional learning, mindfulness. And so we'll have some offerings that are appropriate for teachers in terms of taking care of students, and also teachers in terms of taking care of yourselves. Please make sure that you are doing that as well. All right, so just a quick little Prop 15 spot here. You know, when it comes down to it, and this session is really kind of exemplifies it, as many others have, that we are operating chronically underfunded community schools in California. Our schools serve as the lifeline for students and families that are experiencing an increasingly sort of disproportionate level of poverty. And that sort of hits our schools each and every day, whether it's in a physical context or in the distance context. And you know, this Prop 15 is not going to, by any stretch of the imagination, get us to where we need to be as a state. But it's something, and it'll get us a little bit closer. My recommendation too on this is follow this link, which I will pop into the chat. The link will take you to a plethora of resources available to share with your colleagues. About Prop 15, I recommend the Prop 15 calculator that shows how much your district or LEA would receive. And I also recommend the 10-minute meeting, which you can sort of do via Zoom or your favorite virtual platform with your colleagues. All right. So With that, I'd like to hand it off to Tara. Tara, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Adam. I'm so grateful you opened with the story of you calling me. It makes it real, and my style is real. And so I am just grateful that this topic is getting, a broader audience. And it's so important when we know what students struggle with. So I'm going to tell you just a little bit about myself. I actually was at a district for 10 years doing direct service with students as a liaison in El Dorado County. And then I moved to the El Dorado County Office of Education for about 4 years. And now I have been with SCOE a little over a year. So for me, moving from a district doing direct service to a larger scope at a county office was a really tough decision. I love students and I love working directly with students, but really the goal is to have this larger scope. And so for me in my work now, being able to do a training and get the word out and be really the voice for the youth who I supported for so many years is where my passion lies. And so thank you for this opportunity. And really it is you, Adam. So to put it out there now when I speak and I'm on panels, I often challenge any kind of, administrator or folks who aren't in direct service at the moment to hear a story. Like they'll say, what's your further inquiry or what should we do? Like talk to a student. You would be amazed at the struggle. And so you did that. You had the courage to do that. And you doing that brought this to the forefront. And now we're going to spread the word. So we're going to be a team doing that today. He's my tech guy. So I'm going to just give you a little bit of an overview of what I'm going to talk about. Anything in an hour with McKinney-Vento or in homeless education is really a tough task. Like my initial training is like 2.5 hours. So the goal of covering a lot in an hour is my challenge, and to really guide us in a real way of what this struggle is without just kind of throwing up a lot of information at you. So while I will cover the law briefly, and I will talk about the definition of homelessness so we can arrive really at a shared level of understanding to move on to diving into bigger issues, we'll also hear from a student. I never like to talk about a group without hearing from the group, right? So a student voice is so important when you're talking about this, this topic. We'll also talk about impacts, barriers that students face. I'll really deliver that to you throughout the presentation, but also what can you do as a teacher in general? And in light of COVID, how does that look different right now? And then I'll move into sort of a collective why and talk more about further inquiry, research, and just give you some tools in your toolbox that will allow you to feel empowered about serving this population, because we don't want to just pile on to teachers, right? We already are full. Our plates are all very full right now. So hopefully you'll leave with some really tangible information. So before we leave this screen, I stay on this introduction screen for a reason. The first trademark I have is telling administrators they need to go talk to students. They'll get a real understanding. And then the second kind of trademark I have is I always use this picture in my presentations. I have for years. Love this little girl, love this picture. And I just want you to be mindful before we move off this screen about this picture and notice the doors that this little girl is entering into. So just take a second. Got a few doorknobs there, door, just be mindful of that. But I really want to hear who's in the space with us today. So we're going to do a poll next, and I want to know where your level of understanding is at. So I think Adam's going to walk us through this poll so we can have a collective knowledge of where we're at today.
Yeah, so we've got a poll everywhere set up. So if you would not mind, and I'll pop it in the chat here so that it's nice and easy for you to click on, is go to pollev.com/social forest 350, and it's about to come into the chat. pollev.com/social forest 350. I'm going to paste it in there again. Let's see if we can do this and get the hyperlink. And what that should do is that should take you to a place. If you go to that link in your browser, oh, there you go. What I'd like to do is look at the quadrant. Which quadrant best represents sort of your current level? Do you know about the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act? Have you participated in a training supporting McKinney-Vento students? Let's take some time and drop the dots and see where our room is. You know, Tara, this kind of reflects what was so surprising to me that kind of prompted my initial phone call to you last year. Was, I mean, it's such an incredibly important topic, and there is so much going on in the world of students that are experiencing this. I was frankly like, I felt like, how did I not know about this? How did I not know about McKinney-Vento? How did I not know about navigating what they have to navigate? So
yeah, well, I just want to really, give a shout out to folks who do not know about it and have not participated for choosing this webinar, right? It's a tough choice to come to this topic. I'll just, put it out there and be real. And what I will say is, the gift of being able to get in front of teachers and give this information is teachers own their kids. Like, they care so deeply, right? I'll talk to teachers, they're my kids, And so when we hear this content, what I know is I can deliver it to you, and you care so deeply about your kids, you'll take it on. So I really want to, give you just, good for you for choosing this today. And what I will say is I hope to honor this content and topic is difficult. When you have students or children with the word homeless, there's just a gravity to it. And so, to honor that it's an emotional topic, that I hope to give you as much care as I walk you through this information as you do to your kids. So the other thing I really want to say is, if you do not know, if you've never heard about McKinney-Vento before today and you have not participated in a training, or if you're somewhere in between, right, you kind of know a little bit, but you really haven't been trained, you've done absolutely nothing wrong, right? We know that there are often mandates, and how those mandates are delivered, it means you've done nothing wrong and there's nothing that you should have done before now. It means, awesome, we're here together, and now you're going to know about it. You're going to be able to pass this information on, and this is how we spread the word. I have a really valued colleague who gave me an analogy about training and about McKinney-Vento training and education in general. And she said, it's like painting the Golden Gate Bridge. Like, if you start at one end, by the time you paint and tend to the bridge and get all the way to the other side, you would have on the other side, you'd already need to go back and start touching it up, right? So I've been a liaison in a district. I've been a liaison over the county in multiple jurisdictions. And the reality is, I can train to death every day and I still would miss somebody. I have been on school campuses that I was so responsible for every child, whoever was experiencing homelessness, that I had all the staff trained in the office if somebody walked in to enroll. And the minute somebody was at lunch and somebody from yard duty took over and had never been trained about McKinney-Vento, I just lost that ability. So it's a mandate we are always sort of rolling to get into compliance with. And so we, hopefully we'll do a better job of getting maybe down into teacher induction programs. Some of my colleagues in other counties have brought it out in teacher induction programs. So the goal is to get the word out farther and wider. So thank you for participating in the poll. And I have to admit to you, Adam did this poll and I had no clue what it would look like. I love this platform, right? Really,
Great.
There are things we can do in distance learning. I'm on that learning curve as well. So I think, are we switching?
Yep, I'm going to hand it over to you.
So I'm going to do my screen. Okay. So I'm gonna really begin with this visual. So,
Share the screen.
The little girl and the doors that she was going through, as she starts her day of school, right? Or her journey into school. And so right now, I think it's just so important that we honor each other, and the door that we came to today to work, I suspect looks really different than it did 5 months ago before COVID hit. So I want you to just think for yourself about the door that you're working behind today and how that looks different than it did 5 months ago. And feel free to put into the chat just, some thought. So, are you on a campus? Like maybe your school started, you're on a campus and you're in a classroom with no kids now, staring at the screen, right? Maybe you're at home and you are a parent to multiple children and you can hear them, screaming in the next room and you're trying to focus on your screen. What does that door look like for you? Because taking care of ourselves first and honoring that this is a really unique time. And I don't know about you, but I'm starting another school year without the break that I imagined and a little weathered, right? So I'm working in a yoga studio, a wellness center, because I don't have consistent internet personally. And so this looks really different for me right now as well. So just want to have us consider that taking care of ourselves is really important during this time. And when we talk about really needing to take care of our most in need students, being first on your plate is really important. Got any good stuff in the chat box, Adam?
Yeah, we have some folks that are still on vacation but want to be prepared in school and home. We have people in their guest bedrooms. Yeah. Okay. Then we had some folks who wanted to make sure that they could see your slides. So are you going to share them or?
I have them being shared. So are they not showing? Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right, I can see them.
Yay!
Does that look okay to everybody in the chat?
Is that better?
All right. Yep.
Well, darn it. See my pretty doors?
Well, that was kind of nice.
Doors.
That was kind of nice. It was we had to look to our own imaginations for that first part.
Perfect. Thank you. So visualizing your door. So thank you for those of you who put in the chat they were in their brains visualizing that, right? Okay. So I'm going to just dive right in. You recall I said we have to have a shared level of information to begin talking about how we can serve these students. So I'm going to rattle a lot off to you so that we can get to that shared level of understanding. And so the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act is 33 years old, and it came about in 1987. It was under No Child Left Behind for about 14 years, I believe, and it was most recently authorized in December of 2015 under the Every Student Succeeds Act that we fondly call ESSA. And so the McKinney-Vento Act does for us a number of things. One is it really establishes this definition of homelessness used in schools. And the definition of homelessness in schools, in education, is broader than outside of education. So just to kind of give you that bit of information, I'll go over specifically the definition and explain how that's the case. The second thing it really does is ensures that children and youth experiencing homelessness have immediate and equal access to public education, including preschool. So this is the front door into school for students, that they quickly get enrolled and there are rights and accommodations for them so that there is not a lag or any kind of gap. In fact, it's interesting to note that McKinney-Vento, I think it was 2005 when Hurricane Katrina hit, became much more widely known because you had folks who were in an area that was really devastated, moving nationwide, trying to enroll their students, their children in school. And so more people learned about McKinney-Vento at that time. It's important to note, since we're really focused in California for this webinar, that in the last couple of years, the fires have equally brought attention to McKinney-Vento and really allowed students, if they've lost all of their paperwork and documentation, to go to a district in another county and quickly enroll in school. I know that in El Dorado County, I served a lot of folks coming from where there had been fires. So the really most important thing I'm going to say to you is that every district nationwide, this is a federal law, must have a liaison to identify and serve students experiencing homelessness. So I really want you to hear that, because as I begin telling you a lot more information, I want you to remember this, because there is somebody in your district, in your LEA, your local education agency, whose job it is to identify and serve students. It's possible, depending on how large your area is, that there's even a site liaison. And I know I have districts where there's site liaisons that are assigned to multiple school sites, for example. And so I'll give you links to figure out how that looks in your jurisdiction, so that you know the person that you can connect with should you have a student that you're concerned about and feel that they may be in an unstable housing situation. So let's move forward. So I'm a visual learner, and so for the sake of not having a lot of words on the screen, I love this visual of really looking at the definition of McKinney-Vento. Gives us a number of common scenarios that we find students in who we then identify as qualifying under McKinney-Vento. So in general, we always look to if a child or student lacks a fixed, regular, or adequate nighttime residence. So that's the language we always move back to. So fixed, is it move? Is it permanent, right? Do they go there every night? Is it regular? Do they have a key to it? Do they know every day that they leave school that they're going to go to that same location? Is it adequate? Does it have electricity and running water? And are there multiple people sharing a really small space, which may not be adequate? And so that is in general. When I'm training on for staff who are identifying students, we focus on those 3 words for a long time. But for the sake of this training, again, I'm just going to give you enough of a shared information. Your primary job is not going to be to identify students, but it is to be mindful of what homelessness looks like in education. So these are the categories that the law calls out, really, the most common categories we find students living in. So hotels and motels are one category that, if you're living in a really large, San Diego comes to my mind, a very large jurisdiction where there's a lot of like weekly rate motels, sort of low cost motels. We know that many families who have had evictions on their records or can't gather the money for a deposit for housing, or truly they just can't find housing that matches the wage that they earn, that these motels are somewhere that they often stay longer term or become options kind of between other housing situations. So I'm going to kind of move over to cars next. So cars, we have a lot of families that are living unsheltered or in a car, actually, if they can't find other adequate housing. Abandoned buildings is another example if you're in a large jurisdiction. I was in a rural area for a long time, and so on properties, we know that in a rural area, you could also have a lot of folks who maybe put a trailer on a property and they don't have hookups to things like electricity or running water, but it's the only option temporarily. So that'd be another kind of option of being unsheltered, but in those kinds of accommodations. Students who are in transitional or emergency shelters or transitional housing all qualify under McKinney-Vento. And so that it could be domestic violence shelters, it could be drug treatment programs that children live with their parent while they're navigating through that program. So those are just a couple of examples of shelters and transitional housing programs. Really the last and largest category, a friend or relative's house. In the world of McKinney-Vento, we call this doubled up. It means that there's been a loss of housing and the student and or their family are staying temporarily somewhere else. This could be with a friend or relative. It could be with friends. This could be a teenage student sort of couch surfing. The reality is this is our largest population. And so I'm gonna, for those of you who aren't visual learners, I'll give you kind of the words that I just said, but on this screen, I also attach some numbers to it. So I use the numbers from the Department of Education. I wanted to have accurate vetted numbers. And so the most recent are 17, 18. I give you the link at the bottom if you want to look at more closely. This is California wide. If you want to look nationwide or at a different state, you could always go there and navigate on your own. But the first bullet is just sharing the housing of others due to loss of housing. And so what we find in California, that this is nationwide, it's the largest category, but in California, we're looking at something like 90% in 17, 18 of students who we identified in education were living what we call doubled up and with other people. Motels was about 5.6%, and the unsheltered was 4% in California. And so the numbers don't add up. There was missing data. They did not talk about emergency or transitional shelters or offer a percentage. And I don't know why, but again, I wanted to use the most recent and accurate information. So, while I'm still on this slide, I just want to give voice to, when we talk about these different categories, and I just sort of rattle them off, but when you really begin to think about, wow, we have students in these situations, and that's the really emotional heaviness that this topic brings, is the reality that we have students in our classes who are living in these situations, right? And some students who aren't even enrolled in school. When you look at younger ages or young adults who are experiencing homelessness. But just really to bring the theme through, I want us to consider what the door for these students might look like that they're working behind, right? Or trying to either attend school, so pre-COVID or after this is over, right? But also during distance learning, what does that door look like? So I've talked to teachers for years, and the doubled up category, I'll just give you some examples. When you have families who have fallen out of housing and they're staying somewhere temporarily, I've had teachers say to me, they're living with grandma, they're not really homeless, like they have somewhere to be. So I just want to encourage us to consider our definition of what maybe living with grandma could look different. Like my definition could be really different than your definition, right? It could be that if my family has had generational poverty, I don't have family who has stable housing that is like a safety net for me to fall back on if me and my children fell out of housing, right? And so what this sometimes looks like isn't maybe what you imagine grandma's house to look like. I know that I've had students, for example, who the grandparents lived, or grandma lived in Section 8 housing or in a senior mobile home residence, as an example. And I've had students in really low elementary grades who have to get off the bus and hide to go into grandma's house in a senior residence because the rules are you can't have company for more than 14 days. That's a very general rule that's common in most low-income apartments as well. And so when you have a family structure that grandma says, yes, I know that you'll be on the street if you don't come live with me, but the rules are you can't stay here for a long time. So we need, we're going to have to hide it. The weight of an 8-year-old getting off the bus and having to hide when they walk into the housing, or what's at stake is all of their family will become homeless and unhoused, is a burden that is hard to see on the face of a child. That's the reality of what shared housing looks like. Shared housing is students do not have the ability, children do not have the ability to just walk to the refrigerator and open it if they're hungry and get something to eat. It's shared, it's not theirs. They would otherwise be on the street and there's some dependence, if you will, on somebody else that they're living there. That's shared housing. And when you're talking about a motel, we see a lot of people in motels, and it's tough, close living quarters, right? When you have a one-room hotel or motel that you're sharing with many, many people. And so if you're a 10-year-old and you're in distance learning and you're trying to log on to Google Classroom, like what does that look like? right? What does your front door look like? It's really probably noisy, it's really busy, and there's a lot of navigating for our young people. The other thing I just want to, just to call to where we're at right now with COVID in emergency or transitional shelters. I work with a number of really awesome shelters in the Sacramento area now. And there's one shelter that I really hung up the other day, and I was just struck by the information. So let's just hypothetically imagine we're running a homeless shelter, right? We have like 150 beds, and we had a structure where maybe 40 moms, I'm thinking of a specific shelter here in Sacramento area, were there. Let's just say 50 for even numbers. And the other 100 were all children. And those children went away to school for the day and ate 2 meals at school, right? And then you were just tending to the 50 moms, like what is their schedule? Maybe they have a work schedule and they're going off to work during the day. But what a shelter looked like during the day was really quiet, right? And they got different work done. And all of a sudden COVID hit, and now you have 150 people eating 3 meals a day in a shared space. And those shelters often depend on volunteers to serve those meals, and volunteers are not able, right, for safety to be in there right now. So you have all of the staff really just having eating times be what they're spending most of their time on, right? This is a huge shift for the programs that are serving our families. And if you're a child that you took the bus to school and you had this predictable routine, and now you're in a shelter with a lot of really stressed people in a lot of close quarters, that's just a different experience right now. Just to give you some of that tangible information to be visualizing it. So I want to call out as well another category really on its own, because it's such a growing category, especially in California. So unaccompanied youth is another category. We actually count them within the doubled up definition, but they are students who are not in the physical custody of a parent or legal guardian, and they are in some living scenario that meets the McKinney-Vento definition that I just talked to you about. And so we notice that students we find students in these situations for a variety of reasons, but some common ones I just want to call out are that they may have a parent who is incarcerated. They may have a parent who's had an illness. There may be a parent death, or there may be some sort of family conflict. We know that there's a growing in the larger jurisdictions, LGBT community who falls into that category, that they are sort of pushed out of home and maybe aren't supported by their family, and so they're experiencing homelessness as unaccompanied youth. There's many categories that are overrepresented, and LGBTQ is one of them. So we also know that a lot of youth become homeless with their families and then end up on their own due to a variety of reasons, but two really being lack of space or shelter policies. So if you're a family and you're a family of 5 and you lose housing, maybe you have a friend that 3 of you can stay at, but the other 2 children end up going to a different location, and now they're not with their parent. We see families really getting broken up. In addition, there's a lot of shelters that have policies that you can't have adult children. So if you have an 18-year-old, they may not be able to be with you. There are some shelter programs that actually won't allow, say, a male child over 14 or 15 to be with a family. And then I've seen parents really struggle with where does that child go and stay. So that's how we look at unaccompanied youth as a category. They're really this growing population. And there's really a set of policies and rights and accommodations that are specific to unaccompanied youth. And that's just very important as we see this grow. Really, as a note, when I was in a rural area, I actually had more unaccompanied youth who were younger. So there's no age limit for unaccompanied youth. I had more who were under high school age than I did actually in high school, which was interesting. And I just give voice to, I was in an area that had really high opioid use usage, right? Like there was a crisis in that county. And so the reality is we had a lot of students whose parents were either in drug treatment, best case scenario, or truly just like MIA. They, left for the weekend, left this child with a neighbor, and then that child is sort of, struggling for who is legally responsible for that child. So it's an interesting category I just wanted to give voice to. And you'll notice on my graphic that this one really doesn't have a doorknob, which I did purposefully, right? So you're an unaccompanied youth and you really just don't have your own space. That's most common. And there's really a trauma to being unaccompanied that warrants its own voice. So I want to hear a youth voice. I can tell you day and night what homelessness is like, but it's so important when we talk about a population to also hear from them. And so I'm going to show you about 2 minutes of a video that's a little bit longer. I will share the link with you, and so you're welcome to go at a later time and view the whole link. But we're going to hear from a student to hear his experience.
What comes to mind when you hear the word homeless? Somebody that's drunk, schizophrenic, or even somebody that's asleep on the street. You even see a lot of these stereotypes portrayed in the media.
There are more homeless in New York City than ever before.
By late afternoon, the homeless return.
Aggressive and growing homeless population.
But if you've ever watched an episode of this show, you know that there's more to the story than that. Behind the headlines, there's a category of people that are routinely hidden. Homeless students. Let's start with an inside look at what it's like to be a homeless student. For that, we have to give a huge shout out to Jacob, a student reporter and recent grad from Hillsdale High in San Mateo, California. He introduced us to his homie Dante, who was homeless for about 6 months in middle school when he was 12 years old.
I had him from one of my classes, and he vaguely brought up the point that he was homeless at one point of his life, but he didn't really want to explain why.
Just how big of a problem is student homelessness? And how are they supposed to get help? I met up with Dante to hear his story.
It was 2012, and it was just me and my uncle and my grandma who were living in the house. I was walking down the hill, and my mom was outside, and I remember she had already started crying. Her eyes were red. My grandma had just passed away, and like after that, it kind of dropped. Like what happened was my uncle, he kind of kicked us out. It was barely like 4 days after, and he was basically like, "You guys gotta go." It gets me mad talking about it, but it's terrible. But it's whatever. So we moved in with my mom's friend for a little while until we found a shelter. It was difficult, when I lived in the shelter, I couldn't take showers in the morning, so, I stunk a little. One thing my mom says I'm good at is coping. Like, that's one of the best things. Like, she says I can be sleeping on a hardwood floor and still not be complaining. Like, as long as I have somewhere to sleep, right?
There are many reasons why people become homeless. Maybe their rent is too high, maybe you're LGBTQ and your parents don't approve, so they kicked you out. Each situation is unique to the individual and where that person lives.
So for the sake of time, I'm gonna move forward. You're welcome to go back to that video. It's about 6 minutes long and watch some more of it, but it's so valuable to hear Dante's voice, right? And just really a shout out to him for having the courage to tell his story. It allows us to see what the experience of homelessness looks like for a student. And I want to round back to the categories under the definition. So when you hear Dante talk about the reality of what his experience was, he talked about living with grandma before her death, right? So that may or may not have been permanent. We don't know. We need more information. But then when his grandma passed, then his housing was in jeopardy. And so the reality is they went to a friend's house. So then they were doubled up, right? They stayed temporarily there until they got into a transitional housing program. And so Dante's experience of homelessness is really common, that it's not only, they don't only fall under one part of the definition, they often are shifting around to different housing situations. Rarely is it just one situation and then they magically become permanently housed. Often it's an event of homelessness, and it's often a period of time. And what we really know in homeless education is duration matters in homelessness. Watching students struggle for longer periods of homelessness really adds to the trauma of the event. You heard Dante say it was 5 months or 5 or 6 months. I can't remember that he said that they were homeless. I always, when I've heard kids talk about their experience of homelessness, they give it a timeline. It's amazing. They know exactly how long it is. It was so impactful to them, and it was a big event. So I have colleagues from SCOE, Chris and Hannah, who presented late last week, and they talked about ACEs and adverse childhood experiences in the social emotional learning module. And so they did a really beautiful job of that. We often talk about ACEs when we come in combination with McKinney-Vento, because we know that our students are coming to our classes with trauma, the trauma of homelessness specifically. And frankly, being homeless puts them at risk for the experience of many more traumas. So I'll give you a little bit of an overview of McKinney-Vento, because I really pared this down to focus on teachers and what it is in your classroom. And yet there's so many activities to McKinney-Vento that we're tending to outside of the classroom or before a child enters your classroom that I thought it was really important for you to know and to understand. And this is when some of us are shocked that people haven't heard of McKinney-Vento, just because there's a lot of work we're doing at a county level and at district level to be in compliance with McKinney-Vento and to really remove barriers to school activities and identification, enrollment, and retention for students in school. So the really first basic one is that we have to post education rights, right? I just, I've talked to you for about 20 minutes about this law. Parents are unaware of this law, and there's not a magic way for us to get this information to them. So we do a variety of things. The California Department of Education has posters that we post in every school office and anywhere that parents frequent who may be experiencing homelessness. So this could be in laundromats, it could be at any kind of resource centers. And so I've given you a link to these posters, and I'd encourage you as a teacher, you could have them in your classroom. You could have the more the better. So right now during COVID, actually out of my program, I run a program called Project Teach. We actually just produced a video that's on YouTube. I have the link for it in the resources that is really useful during this time, that it's a virtual video for parents about their children's rights if they're experiencing homelessness. The shelters that we typically are giving presentations in right now, we're not physically there, but we're able to extend this video to them as an option to show to parents. And so any district can download this video. It can be on your website. You can use it however you would like. It's really California-wide. The audience is California-wide. So we also are always looking at identification in McKinney-Vento, and that's identification upon enrollment. So we have a housing questionnaire that is really a best practice that CDE asks us to use. It's on their website that, again, I'll give you in the resources. And so we try to capture students and find out if they're experiencing homelessness upon enrollment. So this is things like looking at online platforms and trying to remove barriers. If parents are having to enroll online, are we asking questions? But students fall out of housing throughout the school year, right? Not just upon enrollment, although we know that they're often moving. And so we want to capture them as they're moving schools. But we also, the best practice is to distribute these housing questionnaires twice a year. So we're asking enrolled students, what is their housing situation? And that's incredibly important right now in COVID, because we anticipate that this economic impact will affect more families, and that there is the potential for more families to be experiencing homelessness in this coming year. So the next 4 things are rights that students have that we're always tending to. So a student has the right to be in their school of origin. So for example, if they're moving from motel to motel in a city, they have the right to attend their school of origin and be connected back to that school, regardless if they move out of the district or not. For the duration of their homelessness and the end of that academic year, the school of origin is available to them. We also automatically qualify kids for school meals. We automatically qualify kids for Title I services and Title I-like services if it's not a Title I school. And we also are always needing to tend to transportation should it be a barrier for students accessing their school. And then lastly, we're here doing exactly this, staff training, right? The goal is to get the word out to staff, to give information to anybody and every staff member on a campus who is touching students, so that their eyes and ears are open for these scenarios that students are living in. So let's move to the impact and barriers. And really, this can be an hour in itself, right? I created this slide and I had a colleague say, you know, this slide is difficult. There's a fulcrum, but they're really typically on a fulcrum. If you took something off of the decrease and put it into the increase box, it would shift the fulcrum. And the reality is all of this is negative. This is the burden, the real emotional toll that this experience of homelessness and the work in homelessness can take. What we know is the impact is huge to students. We know that homelessness is associated with an 87% increased likelihood of dropping out of school. And we're grateful in the last few years to begin to be responsible to collect data on graduation rates. So we're looking at how do we tend to that end of the spectrum. What we also know is homelessness affects everything from physical health to mental health, you know, truancy to social skills and a lack of academic achievement, having moved, you know, students who have moved or just really, and from my lens, aren't present to learn. So kids need to have their basic needs tended to be present to learn. And it's really difficult to be present to learn when those things aren't tended to, right? So we're trying to tend to all of those things so they can be in your classroom and be present to learn. Again, I could spend all day on the impacts and barriers, but these are just some insight into what we know the toll is. Again, it's trauma, and it has lasting effects for students. So I'm going to move. It's tough to have any kind of comic relief in this topic, but just for, you know, the sake of a comic strip, right? I like this visual, you know, the reality of. So I have all these, you know, issues. Could someone help me with these? Because I'm really late for math class. You know, this is the reality of homelessness. We know that students come to us with all of these things that need tending to. So I'm going to shift and tell you a really quick story. Because I know that I've done a little bit of focus on the higher or on secondary, and I want to be aware that this is an elementary and secondary audience. And so I saw actually in the introduction a kindergarten teacher, and my heart is always for a kindergarten teacher because it's so painful to see your students. You all have such a loving heart often. And so I'm going to tell you a really brief story about a student. Many years ago, I was called to a principal's office about a student, and everybody was really frustrated with this student. And his name was Connor, and he was in the 2nd grade, and I was called to the office to really deal with him. So the office staff was struggling, the principal was really struggling for a variety of reasons, but Connor had thrown a chair in his classroom, in his 2nd grade classroom that morning. And you know, what I know is no 2nd grader wakes up and plans to throw a chair in their classroom. Like, right, that's always a product of something else. Like I know that in the core of my being. And so it was actually the first time this teacher had ever kicked a student out, which is a little bit of why the office was in a frenzy, because it was very rare, right? She was a really awesome structured teacher. And so it was unique that she would kick a student out. So he wasn't remorseful, was part of the other struggle that the staff was having with him. And so when I sat with him in the principal's office, I really asked him a different set of questions. So I said, you know, Connor, what did you have for dinner last night? What did you have for breakfast? And I discovered he hadn't eaten since lunch the day before. What I also discovered was that he was staying in a motel with his family nearby. And this was how I identified him, right? We didn't know this before he told me. And he had woken up that morning in the motel and he couldn't find his backpack. So he's really flustered and he'd missed the bus. And so at 7, he walked from the motel to school and he really rushed. He shared that with me. And so I was struck by the fact that he missed breakfast, but he got to school on time. Because I had the foresight to look at his attendance for the last few days. Like, had he been at school? What had been going on with him? Was he late that day? Kind of what was happening in Connor's world. And so the other thing that he had was he was physically really uncomfortable. And I noticed that his pants were too small. His button didn't button and they were too short. And he was just really distracted physically by being uncomfortable in his clothing. So I know this teacher really personally, and she's so wonderfully highly structured, like I said, and she also is very transparent that she comes from an immigrant background and has really high standards for her students. She says, we need to teach our students responsibility. And so after getting Connor a backpack and some food, actually, I recall the principal actually gave Connor his own food out of his lunchbox while we were in the office. Because again, he hadn't thought of these questions, right? So he was pretty struck by the answers that Connor was giving us. So Connor and I walked back to class, and I had arranged with his teacher that he could really come back into the classroom and have a second chance. And so many elementary campuses look the same. And the picture that I've shifted to, this may look similar, to where you've taught before or what your classroom has looked like. But Connor and I went to that picnic table and we sat down, and he finished the food that we had given him. And I said, Connor, do you need anything else from me, right? Like, you're going to be able to go back in the classroom. We talked about some behaviors, and he hopped up and he ran over to that hook on the right that you see that's empty. And he put the backpack I'd given him on that hook. And he said, now I belong in this classroom. And, I tell the story because Connor taught me one of the biggest lessons in my career. And that was that I discovered he was smarter than I realized, and that he had actually done the only behavior that day that would likely get him kicked out of class, because it was a place he felt that he did not belong that morning because of what he didn't have. And I can only imagine what was in his backpack that he didn't bring to school. Maybe it was a library book that was overdue, or something that his teacher had asked students to turn in. And he knew her high standards and wanted desperately to abide by them, and he did the only thing that got him kicked out. So I tell this brief story because I don't have all the answers, but I want us to be mindful of what we see in the presence of students when they're present with us, right? There's lots of things I could see about Connor, and I know the teacher could see, and his behaviors were really signs for us that something was awry. But what is it in distance learning that we're not seeing would be my question to us as teachers. Not only what we're not seeing, but what is our role in distance learning to ask a different set of questions? And you're welcome to put stuff in the chat if things come to your mind. To ask students a different set of questions. Right? How are we to find, are their basic needs being met? Because if we know that Maslow's hierarchy of needs says we've got to tend to these needs before they're present to learn, how do we do that in a distance learning platform? So is it that you have an assignment that you ask them, what does their door look like, right? Where are they working? Where do you sit and do your work? What does that look like? So that it gives you more information. I'm going to just suggest that what we do know in this new virtual world is Connor's backpack would look really different today. So I give this, funny clip art of a virtual backpack. What we know is stuff has shifted, right? We now know that students will have face masks with them in their backpack. It's a requirement. So do homeless families even have access to face masks? Like, are we giving them out? Wait, no, that was a barrier kind of early on. We know that Wi-Fi connectivity is a thing, right? I work in a wellness center here because I don't have internet connectivity consistently where I live, and I'm not homeless. And so the reality is we are challenged with creating connectivity for all of our students. We know that some device, if we have an online platform, even if we have a hybrid, is probably necessary. If it's paper packets, how are families getting to the schools to even pick those up? We know that right now our students' virtual backpack looks really different than it did pre-COVID. I'm just going to suggest a few things to you that, again, I don't have all of the answers, but what I know is before and after COVID, creating a structure as a teacher and predictability in your virtual and in your physical class when you go back to that environment is highly, highly important for homeless students. When everything else in their lives is not stable, school is what is stable. So I would ask you as a teacher, what does the front door to your virtual classroom look like for a student who needs this kind of structure and predictability? Just put that lens on and ask yourself that as you rolling out your classes. If you have a student who quickly drops in attendance or disengages, report those changes quickly to a district or site liaison. And really honor students by being discreet, especially in the higher grades. Use words like temporary housing or in transition, and avoid labeling students as homeless and further traumatizing them. And listen for keywords about housing, right? Where are they saying they're staying? Is it somewhere different than the last time that they logged on? Watch for those changes in really behavior and engagement. And if a student needs a device or hotspot, refer them to a site liaison or district liaison. If you know that they're homeless, it's possible you don't know that students in your class are homeless. It's possible they haven't been identified yet. You hearing this information and referring to a liaison could be how they're identified, because we know they fall out of housing. We also know there's fear around reporting being homeless to school staff or anybody, right? It could be embarrassment. I mean, I used to live in a small town where everybody knew everybody. So if you'd fallen out of housing, you may just sheer embarrassment not want to tell anybody. Be mindful if you use a platform that involves video to allow a student the option to have their camera off and their audio muted. So if they're sharing housing, right, or they want privacy, that may be an option that's necessary for them. And so just that's on your drop-down menu of the possibility for a student that's an accommodation could be helpful. Maintain high expectations through assignments and lessons with flexibility in deadlines and choices. So choice is so important for students who really in homelessness, my experience is students lack choice. They don't wake up, walk to the cupboard, open, choose between 5 cereals for what to have for breakfast. Really choice in scarcity is often taken away. So in a physical environment, I would say to teachers, have them choose between a pen or a pencil, lined paper or blank paper. There's power in choice. And so can you do that in an online platform? Can you give 2 writing prompts and have them choose which one they want to do? And what you do best as teachers is really creating connection with students and empowering them. And that is so important, especially in distance education right now, distance learning, that connection could make or break a student staying in school. And for the sake of time, I'm going to move forward but just call the fact that there's this empathy video, and it's only about 2 minutes long, so I may come back to it in a minute. But for those of you who have a hard stop at 4:30, I want to talk for just a second about our collective why. And then I may go back to the video if you're able to stay longer. I know that I have permission to go a little longer than 4:30, so I'll choose to do that just for the sake of, I need a little more time. So our collective why in education is really summed up in this Voices of Youth Count by Chapin Hall. I love the work that they do. I've seen them present their work. It's just profound. And so really I pulled out 3 bullet points out of their findings, but the first 2 are profound. That a lack of a high school diploma or GED is the top risk factor for young adult homelessness. And that youth without a high school diploma are 346% more likely to experience homelessness. If you teach kindergarten, 3rd grade, 8th grade, or 12th grade, your goal as a teacher to get students to the next assignment or just through the next school year is actually the thing that can prevent them from homelessness and be really their pathway out of poverty and out of homelessness. So every single assignment, every year that you teach, you are giving kids this gift, and especially our students who experience homelessness, it's really inoculating them against homelessness. I think that's just so important. I wanted to have that collective why together. So ideas for further inquiry and application that CTA asks that we kind of do this slide is, right? Please spend some time on these, seeking these answers. Like, who's the liaison in your district? I told you I'd give you that link. This is a link. on the CDE webpage for McKinney-Vento. And this PowerPoint will come out to you some later, but you can look on here for who your liaison is in your district and ask more questions. Do you have a site liaison? And if you do, who is that person? Are they assigned to multiple schools? Who is it that now that you have this information about students experiencing homelessness and knowledgeable about the McKinney-Vento Act that exists in education, you can refer students to this liaison. It's going to be your the key tool in your toolbox. And you can ask, does this liaison or does the program within your LEA or district have a community resource guide or brochures for families? Could you put the posters in your classroom like I alluded to before? But this resource guide, could you give it to all families, right? So we tend to put food resources and clothing closets, and maybe it can help all families, not just homeless families, but you could take it upon yourself to be that space to always give resources to every family. And as I mentioned in the beginning, and so did Adam, really sharing this information with at least one other teacher, asking your principal, do we have training that we can have on our campus? Can we put the video that I told you about parents, teaching parents about their student rights, their children's rights on your website, on your district website? These are all things that are in your power. So I give you 2 sets of slides for additional resources. And I honor that it's 4:30, so if you need to go, this is being recorded. You could always revisit this module, and I'm going to give you a little bit of information about the resources, and then I'm going to go back to my empathy video. So,
just so you don't feel rushed, because I would love for you to have the opportunity to kind of express everything you'd like to, and grab a drink of water.
Thank you, Adam.
Yeah. I would just like to say, hey, for those of you that have joined us and you have to go, we totally get it. Please fill out your reflection form if you are looking for verification of hours for this session. Please fill out the feedback form to help us improve. Please grab one of the links to or visit the distance learning site. Pop the link in the chat to check out the video after the fact. Please do share. A lot of us had not heard of McKinney-Vento, did not understand, or maybe was not aware of the sort of the full scope of challenges. And I think one of the things that we can do in terms of a next step is, if you can just each one teach one, have a conversation with somebody, really kind of figure out who your liaison is and start to listen to your students for those signs that maybe there may be some insecure housing going on, and start to engage other like teaching buddies in problem solving. And so thank you so much. The survey link is on the online events page, right back out there. I'll start popping some of these links in the chat right now, but I just wanted to say thank you so much. If you have to go, we understand, but Derek, can you hang around for a little bit?
Yeah.
All right, cool. So it is all back to you, and I'm going to start popping links in the chat, and then
Thank you, Adam. So I've given you 2 slides of resources, and I just want to walk you through a few of them. The California Department of Education has a homeless education page, and I've pulled out from all of these resources actually really teacher and classroom specific tools that each agency gives. So the Homelessness in the Classroom PowerPoint from CDE is a good resource, gives you some real mindful tips and trades in the classroom. Also, the You Can Enroll poster that I referenced, and really also internet access, because that's such a really large topic right now. They have really for all available plans and a kind of a comprehensive in one location. Schoolhouse Connection is also an advocacy group, and they put out some really awesome resources. So supporting student attendance and tips for teachers and staff on how to support students experiencing homelessness. The National Center of Homeless Education is the technical assistance hub for the Department of Ed. And so I pulled a few things out: common signs of homelessness, also a research summary of teaching and classroom strategies for homeless and highly mobile students. I've also given you NACE, the virtual conference. I'll click forward actually, because Adam stuck this in here for us. Their virtual conference is coming up in October, and Well, it used to be in person and it's nationwide, so it's always in a different state. This is a really unique opportunity because it's very inexpensive to being on a virtual platform. And so it may even be, if you were unable to attend the whole time, that even a day of attendance could be valuable, or even just a couple of breakout sessions. So I just wanted to give you that information because it's a unique opportunity given that it's virtual this year. In addition, I've put my own program at the Sacramento County Office of Education on there for you. I have a Project Teach website. Again, that's the name of my program. And I've also linked the video that I referenced of education rights for students that you're welcome to download and use freely in your districts. I also have linked both videos that I showed. I only showed one and I promised to go back. This is about a 2-minute video, and I just find it to be powerful with no words, to talking about really as educators, a lens that's helpful for us. So we'll spend about 2 minutes listening to this. Thank you so much to those of you hung in here and let me go over a little bit. I'm honored to have shared this time with you. I love that empathy video. You know, it reminds me years ago, I'll tell a really quick story and then be done. I had a office that was very upset with me that a student had come in and they had handled this student and they didn't know that she had gone to an emergency shelter that day. And they said, if only you had told us that she had gone to the shelter. And I've often reflected on that day and that conflict, that really we should treat all students with the level of respect and each other with the level of respect, that we don't know what each other are faced with. And that video reminds me of that. So you may have a student experiencing homelessness, you may or may not know about it, but being mindful with these tools can help you to meet their needs, whether you know or not. So thank you, Adam, so much for inviting me today to just give a little bit of information. I hope if we have now teach some more teachers who know about McKinney-Vento, hear the language from students, maybe understand if they're unstably housed and refer to a liaison. If we've done that, we've met with success.
I think so. And there's just a lot of gratitude in the chat for your information and for sharing with us today. And I think this is a starting point. You know, I think there is a need and a call to get more of this information out. I have worked with teachers my whole professional career, and kind of like you said, they have such a loving heart, right? And I think that there is, you know, once you're aware of this, once you start to see it around you and see the patterns and hear the subtle kind of gives from the students that clue you into it, it's something you can't turn off. And I just look forward to working with you in an ongoing way and sort of seeing what we can do to kind of bring that kind of training and support to teachers across the state going forward. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I see a teacher asked about where to get posters. And so I just want to make sure that they know they can ask their liaison for a poster for their classroom. CDE has them on their website, but your liaison will likely have them through your district. And so you can get them that way.
Okay, I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your week and hopefully a restful weekend.
And good luck in this school year. Thank you for teachers. Thanks.